briefly I'll explain Carl's second answer question, why is there a difference between cannabis and tobacco smoke? And just add also to what Dr. Lucido said, Dr. Tashkin did a prospective case control study with 1,600 LA residents matched with several matched controls to age, gender, race, and they found a dose response, meaning more tobacco smoke means higher rates of head and neck cancers. It was really clean for all types of cancers of the lungs and aerodigestive tract. But then when you compare that with the joint years, that's how they use, a little bit of joints per day times this many years, and you add that all up, there was no dose response to any increased incidence in cancer, and in fact there was no significant correlation. And in one category there was a statistically significant protective effect for a certain number of joint year users, and that matches up with what Dr. Bearman is saying, that cannabinoids have been shown to have anti-tumor properties in a whole host of different tumors, and we've been getting the mechanisms down now too. So, and how much dose you need to have for that, we got to figure that stuff out with additional research, but it's probably a significant amount. The reason why there's a difference, I'll just say quickly, Dr. Melamede's paper in Harm Reduction Journal called Cannabis and Tobacco Smoke Are Not Equally Carcinogenic. I reviewed that paper. It's a very readable thing for any layperson to read, and it just explains that nicotine actually does things above and beyond that makes it less willing for cells that should have died to not die. And also cannabinoids stop the conversion of pro-carcinogens to carcinogens in the liver. So there's these kind of pharmacological reasons, that, and of course radiation, additives, all kinds of other things, but they're two different. All smoke is not created equal.
Yeah, I think that point is very good. We've been, in some ways, a victim of our own success in convincing people not to smoke tobacco. And of course, the other thing is that this is an enormous red herring, because anybody who's concerned about smoking marijuana doesn't have to consume it by smoking it. They can vaporize it, they can use an under-the-tongue tincture, either with drops or spray, or they can eat it. And in fact, when you read some of the government propaganda, they talk about the dangers of smoking. Well, if they're concerned about that, people just don't have to smoke it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to mention for patients out there that on the website for the Vancouver Island Compassion Society, which is at www.thevics.com, we have recipes. We have recipes on how to make oral mucosal sprays, cookies, butters, and tincture. And so for those of you patients who are currently using it, who have access to materials, leaf or bud material, you can make very effective products, including oral mucosal sprays on your own and at home. And regarding cancer, I wanted to add one last thing, that CBD's recently been proven to be an anti-carcinogen as well. And CBD is not readily available in commercial cannabis strains, whether you're growing it medically or getting it on the streets. And that's yet another reason, in reference to our hemp panel this morning, why we have to advance research and production of hemp all over North America, because that's where we're going to find the high CBD strains that might be able to lead to cancer cures and to cancer medicines without having some of the psychoactive effects of the rest of the plant. Any other questions to these amazing physicians and doctors who can, here we go, I'll start back here and then come up here.
I'm wondering about its use for schizophrenia. They're making me use, I think, risperidone tablets and a liquid syringe injection of contra form of risperidone. And I'd like to find out if there's a possibility that it could help that way as well, and more about the positive side effects. There's the digestive system improvement, respiratory system improvement. How about the psychological improvement?
Good question. That's kind of one of the verbatim areas of medical cannabis right now when it comes to psychological disorders.
Well, you know, California is the only state that you can use it for the mood disorders, and that was because of Dr. Mikaria, founder of Society of Cannabis Clinicians, and he died last year, unfortunately, but the new issue of O'Shaughnessy's is dedicated to him. Now, he insisted as a psychiatrist that, you know, our law has a bunch of illnesses listed like all the other states, but ours says, and any other illness for which it provides relief. So it's only California that you can use it for. anxiety, insomnia, depression, PTSD. And Dr. McGarry has written quite extensively on it. Specifically for schizophrenia, some people feel that that's one of the relative contraindications, but I have a number of people with schizophrenia that are stable, that have been using it. I have no problem recommending it if they're stable and they attest and they're seeing their doctor and they're using it for specific symptoms, anxiety, depression, insomnia that go along with the schizophrenia. But I guess the concern is if somebody's unstable and they've never used cannabis before, you don't know how the reaction is going to be. But in general, it's so much safer than many of the other medicines you mentioned that probably, you know, if under a doctor's, you know, care, it would probably be a reasonable thing to use. But again, if somebody's been using it, and they're stable and it's benefiting, I have no problem recommending it for schizophrenia. But there is a relative contraindication.
In my experience of distributing medical cannabis now to over 800 people in Victoria, we treat a lot of people with bipolar disorder, with psychological disorders. We find that in some cases, particularly in a high state of mania, it makes things worse. And so you have to be a very good self-monitor if you're using cannabis for psychological disorders. And the other thing that I'd want to add is that in terms of strain symptom responses, we find that sativas, if you have a predisposition for anxiety or stress, can actually make that stress or anxiety worse, whereas indicas tend to be a bit more calmative, a little bit more analgesic and relaxant. And so that's just some personal research that we've been doing in-house that might help you to treat your condition.
Oh, thanks, Phil. My question basically goes to Sunil, and I think it's wonderful that we have doctors on the panel who are from California. And my concern is, as a permit holder, it was a real struggle for me to actually receive my permit, even though I have one of the 7 qualifying Washington State maladies.
10.
Oh, 10, I'm sorry. But what is, Sunil, what do you think it's going to take for this whole panel to be a bigger table filled with Washington State doctors? Because as I see it, the only way I was able to get my permit was to take my medical records from my doctor and go to one of the various clinics where there's some courageous doctors who, I guess, just don't care what happens to them, and they, you know, give us permits, and it's still a scary thing. But, you know, I would just like to see the whole table filled with Washington State doctors so we all knew where to go, and that's my question.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, we don't even have numbers on how many physicians are authorizing medical cannabis in the state. You can guess based on Oregon's numbers that maybe 2,000 physicians are involved in it here, but some people say that that's completely just a guess. And some research I did at a delivery site, there was patients of, I think, 60 different physicians' patients had been sent there to receive cannabis, or sorry, patients who've been authorized by physicians in Washington State had been receiving treatment there. So they're there, they're around. They're not organized. They don't have the Society of Cannabis Clinicians like California had early on to get these doctors together. We don't have a group like that in Washington. That's what we're hoping to build. Same as most places, we don't have there's no education on it. You know, there's no continuing medical education. In medical school, I was a student there. We introduced it a few times in our curriculum, 1 or 2 times. And, oh, cannabinoids can do some good things for pain, and it's too bad we can't do more research on that. You know, next topic, kind of thing. So, I mean, it's an active process of education that has to go on. Dennis. Okay, I'll just. There's an initiative to get some education going. A medical cannabis liaison from the state of Washington that Dennis, this gentleman who was here earlier in the last panel, Moyers, is doing, and he wants to do education county by county with physician groups, and that, I think, is the way to go.
I think in the short term, the only way we're going to get more Washington doctors up here is clear I-75 so that we can get Greg Carter in for the end of the discussion.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I noticed when I look at California Normal's website, they have a list of physicians, and in Washington, I only see one of the chains there. So I asked Greg Carter, do you want to be listed? He says, oh, I didn't know you could do that. So I'm going to make sure Greg Carter gets listed. He's here in Seattle. He's a physiatrist, a doctor of physical medicine. And what I recommend, and it's a shame, what I want is more doctors feeling comfortable. I have lots of copies of my article, Implementation of the Compassionate Use Act in the Family Medical Practice. It's a blueprint for doctors to make safe and appropriate recommendations. I recommend you give one of these to your doctor and have them email me if there's any questions, because my whole purpose of Medical Board Watch is to be talking to the medical board and having them lay off doctors